I'm very happy to be opening this lecture series. We are a special interest group for typology within the Association for Computational Linguistics, and my talk today is on typologically-driven syntactic modeling of a particular aspect of human language within a computational framework. So here's some well-known facts, such as you might find in your favorite Intro to Linguistics textbook. There's plenty of languages in the world, thousands of them, but we tend to speak, most of us tend to speak only the ones which are in the top 10%. And while many languages are being spoken less and less, and in fact are disappearing from the face of the earth. And this well-known fact matters, of course, for culture and society, but for us as researchers, it matters also in terms of some of the research questions that we might have. Indeed, what is the range of variation in human language and why it is the way it is one of the fundamental questions in linguistics. Now, what about natural language processing? Natural language processing is this discipline, as we all know, where we tend to learn models automatically from data. And then we use those models to perform a variety of linguistic tasks, or language-related tasks at least, and to learn something, hopefully learn something about the faculties involved in those tasks, human language faculties. Now, I was once told that NLP is also after learning something about the world, quote unquote, through analyzing language data. I suspect that what Mark Yatzkar, who told me this, I suspect what he meant had something to do with what we tend to do today in building knowledge bases, etc. And so we are kind of arriving at a particular structure of knowledge through attempting language tasks, right? And so the degree to which we manage to capture something regarding how the world is organized can kind of be measured by how successful we are at performing language tasks using this understanding of the world. So something like that perhaps is natural language processing. And so does NLP care about the range of language variation? We just said that linguists care about it. Finding and describing and analyzing the range of variation in human language is a fundamental goal. Natural language processing, well, I think that we will all agree that for learning about language faculties, NLP researchers probably care about the range of variation in human language, similar to how linguists care about that, just because it's a very similar goal there. As for performing linguistic tasks and language-related tasks, maybe natural language processing cares, but perhaps not so much if we can successfully transfer models from a few high-resource languages. Well, to this, I think I'm going to say, no, we still care, because in order to properly evaluate the performance on a variety of languages, we probably need some kind of systematic understanding of those languages first, because how else do we judge how well we did? To summarize this introduction, understanding the range of variation in human language is important for culture and society, and it is important for research. It can be a fundamental goal. It can be less fundamental of a goal, but it can still be core to particular aspects of research models, such as evaluation of natural language processing models. And that is because one can transfer a model from English to another language, but still needs systematic knowledge about what that other language entails to evaluate the performance. So how do we learn about this range of variation? Well, one way clearly is to study more languages. And this is kind of what many fields do. Like that, apparently they've just discovered this new species of orangutan in 2017. And this guy, I think he's a guy, he looks very much like other orangutans do. And yet researchers jumped at the opportunity to describe this newly discovered species, even though he clearly shares a lot in common with the already discovered species. And that is because we are still enriching our understanding of the system, in this case, the zoological system, by adding a description of a new species to it. It's kind of similar with languages. The more we are able to systematically describe and analyze, the more we can hope to understand about the entire language system in the world. Now, studying small sets of languages is also valuable, and this is actually where linguistics and natural language processing kind of have something, I think, to discuss with each other, to talk about to one another, because there are linguists who focus on sort of this in-depth inquiry into just a few languages. And certainly there are NLP researchers as well who tend to focus, for example, on models which are trained mainly on English, and probably they work best for English. And then there's this question, to what degree is that knowledge transferable? One important aspect here is that focusing on just a few languages, while very valuable, tends to bias which questions we ask, what kind of research questions we have. As one example, so I'm citing just a couple of studies here, one by Idiatov and one by Bybee. And in the Idyatov's study, this is a study about question words. What he finds there is that question words exist in most languages that he looked at, and he looked at hundreds. He looked at hundreds of languages, and he established that question words like what, when, how, etc., you can find some lexical items in pretty much every language that you look at. So that is an example of how you might have started from just a small subset of languages and successfully extrapolated on other languages, right? You looked at English and German and French, and you hypothesized that words like what, why, and when will be found in other languages of the world. And indeed, you would be right in that case. But that would kind of be a lucky guess. In this other study from 1985, they showed that particular distinction in marking past and present tense differently is not really that typologically common. We're very used to marking past and present tense differently in Indo-European languages, but it is indeed not something that all languages necessarily do. And so in that case, we would be completely wrong to hypothesize something like that and to extrapolate. So how do we do this? How do we study languages such that we avoid such pitfalls? Well, linguistic typology is, of course, the field that concerns itself with studying the range of variation with respect to relatively broad characteristics. Typologists pay special attention to diversity of language material, of languages. At the same time, there's a variety of theories. Syntactic theory, which is what I'm going to talk about today, but there are also, of course, semantic, morphological, phonological, discourse theories, you name it. And here we're talking more about this in-depth type of inquiry into modeling phenomena with generative power, with predictive power. So we want to be able to formally state something such that we can predict in terms, in the case with syntax, what will be the grammatical sentences in this language, and we want to reject everything else, right? Generative power. Traditionally, these two branches of linguistics exist kind of separate from each other, which is completely normal, of course. Each person specializes on their own topic. There have, of course, been syntacticians who were also typologists and vice versa. And I am going to talk about combining the two as well. In particular, I will be talking about computational framework in which we aim to combine the breadth of typology with the depth of syntactic theory. And computational modeling is important here because of reproducibility and rigor that computational modeling provides when assembling these different fragments of the in-depth syntactic analysis into a typologically diverse system. So you can already start imagining how we have lots and lots of bits and pieces in such a system where we want to combine typology with syntactic theory. Now, crucially, I will be talking today about computational modeling of the theory, so which is very different, I think, from language modeling as that term is used in natural language processing. And you will see what I mean in the second portion of my talk. Broadly, computational syntax of the sort that I will be talking about concerns itself with implementing grammars on the computer and then running those grammars automatically on sentences. And because it's a program grammar, it's an implemented grammar, you can have as many sentences as you like from as many languages as you have data from and as you have grammars for, of course, including typologically diverse languages. And crucially, you can perform these exercises by checking the generative capacity of your grammar and the precision of your grammar as many times as you need on as much material as you like. And as your grammars, your implemented grammars grow, you accumulate what I like to call grammar artifacts, which are essentially knowledge artifacts. They are linguistic knowledge artifacts because they formalize our hypotheses about grammar. Philosophically, this is reminiscent of Montague's method of fragments. So Montague had this idea that grammar fragments that are fully explicit can therefore be extended, right? You take one fully explicit grammar fragment and you can formally combine it with the other. And as such, you can kind of grow this building of grammatical knowledge using the computer, of course, because this problem becomes absolutely intractable if you try to do something like this by hand, to combine your understanding of, let's say, how tense works with the understanding of how the person system and the case system works. As you keep adding your formal understanding of all of those things, you kind of arrive at this immensely complex structure, which is not easy to reason for without the aid of the computer. To wrap up this first part of my talk, our big question is, what is the range of variation in human languages? And there are many ways to approach this question, and there are many fields which are invested in that question to different extents and in different degrees. There is typology, there is syntactic, semantic, phonological acquisition, and other linguistic theories. There is computational linguistics, and there is natural language processing. And you probably noticed that I use this term slightly differently, and we can talk about it during the Q&A period. So it sort of has to do with what kind of questions that each discipline is asking. And all of these fields probably want to know more about the range of variation in human language. And so in the second part of my talk, I will talk about my way of approaching this through combining syntactic theory and linguistic typology.